I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, first thing on the agenda tonight is request from City of Murfreesboro for utility easements, track 14-1 and track 14-2, 502 Memorial Boulevard. Call on the mayor.
Okay, all of you have heard about the bridge over Broad Street that's going to be put in place. TDOT's going to be building that. That's going to impact a little bit of our frontage and utility easements there on Memorial, where we have our maintenance department. Okay, so he read off, there's actually two, but there's one across the face of the frontage on the Memorial. Then there's that one other easement that goes from the Memorial back through our property to the little street behind the archives building there. So what this is this is moving forward through the system, and the City of Murfreesboro is buying utility easements and other easements on behalf of the Tennessee Department of Transportation, so all this project can go forward. So it just happens that we're one of the people that have some property that need this on. I don't have anything big enough for you to see, actually, but all of this amounts to this. It's about 10,000 square feet of easement that they need for the. We already have some easement. Ben can tell you more about it. If you can see this little yellow piece of stuff here that's on the frontage of our property. There is already an easement there. This is expanding the easement plus taking the easement diagonally across our property back toward the little street there that the archives building is situated on. Okay, that's 10,000 square feet of easement. If we accept the offer and don't go through a condemnation process, which I recommend that we accept the offer, we get 10% more than the appraisal. So 10% more than this appraisal. The appraisal on 10,000 square feet, remember 10,000 square feet is only not even a fourth of an acre, is the appraised value is $54,000. An additional 10% will get us up to $60,219.50. So this is going to have to happen, and they've used appraisers that we've used before. I think it's a fair number. So I'm recommending that we accept the offer from the city with respect to this development's taking place across this Broad Street that expands the turn lanes and stuff up there to us, you might say, to enter into an agreement with the city of Murfreesboro with respect to this and accept their offer. That's the proposal on the table. I think all this stuff is on your iPads. I haven't looked to see, but I think it's out there.
Yeah. So are you combining
Both of them together.
Both together?
Need to go together.
Okay, so
One of them is very tiny. One of them's like 2,800 feet, and the other one's like 7,700 square feet. So,
16.
yeah, this is just that's the little piece. The little piece is,
Okay.
see, there's two pieces there. One of them is 14,000. The other one is like 40,000. You add those two together, you get 54 plus 10% is $60,000.
We just need a motion to send this to budget.
Yes, sir.
I'll go ahead and make that recommendation to send both easement tracks to the budget committee as recommended on the agreement.
Okay, we got a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We got a second. Any more discussion? If not, call the roll.
Commissioner Baum?
Yes.
Commissioner Coggan?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Yes. Okay. EMS lease with Seton Corporation. Mayor, you have that
Okay, yes, I
in
do.
front of you?
And Becky, I'm gonna let you have what you want out of that and give me that. That one is in final form. This one here is not in actual final form. Mr. Nunley, I think most of you may be aware that we've been talking sometime with the Seton Corporation, which is really Middle Tennessee Medical Center, okay? Now it's St. Thomas Rutherford, okay? They have property that we're currently occupying and leasing. Where our ambulance station is on Burton Street, that's property of the hospital. They've been leasing that to us for many years. That's 614 East Burton Street, and over on 611 East Lytle Street is the old PACE Center that most of you know about. Those two pieces of property the hospital still has. They sold everything else to Middle Tennessee State University. And we've been talking to them about giving us a lease, a long-term lease on this property for a while, and we now have in hand a lease. It's got a couple of things that we're probably going to get changed, but they're minor, that will allow us to have a 50-year lease on this property with the conditions that we put in place there, a permanent ambulance station. That's one of the requirements of this lease. In other words, we've got a converted residential little structure that you can barely back 2 ambulances in there, and you have to be an expert driver to make that happen. But that would come down, and we'd build a replacement ambulance station there. And in addition to that, the PACE Center would be a permanent location for our administrative offices. Our administrative offices are now in this little house, plus we have the double garage, you might say, to hold the 2 ambulances. We would take that down, we would build a standalone ambulance station, and then we would take the PACE Center and convert that into office spaces for our administrative services for our ambulance department. So that's the proposal. The lease is $50 for a 50-year lease. And we will have some right of first refusal at the time that they choose to sell this to a third party, but we would have a right of first refusal. And so we think it's a good long-term solution to a problem we really have now that we've been sort of struggling with for a while. I think we put a little money in the budget this year, didn't we, Mike, to even accommodate some of this? So we've got $250,000 set aside for the purpose of building the ambulance, and that may or may not be enough money, but we've put that much already in the current budget.
Didn't we have a time frame too? We had to demolish 5. Okay, I remember there was a time frame on
there's
the building you're in now. On the PACE Center, there's.
Well, we have to. Yeah, there is some language in here. I really should have reviewed this again, Commissioner Young. That we do have to. We have to show a good intent within a certain length of time to move this. I think we have to. Well, from the time we execute this, we got 180 days to get to enter into a purchase agreement with them, etc. And I forgot, Mike, you may be right. What did y'all say? How long do we have before we have to actually complete it?
2 years.
2 years?
After
All right, so you found it in there. 2 years after we sign the agreement, we need to have the ambulance station piece of it replaced and put in place. So we have already in the budget about enough money to do that probably, and if we don't, the ambulance service itself has enough in its fund balance to take care of that. So what we need is a preliminary approval of this, and like I told you to start with, there may be 1 or 2 smaller changes, but nothing of any significance to allow us a little bit more time to make decisions on the right of first refusal, etc., if it happens. So if you would grant preliminary approval of this subject to continued review by our county attorney, and we won't take it forward to the budget committee until such time as we get an iterated, you might say, version of this. But I didn't want to wait. We might not have a budget property management meeting for another month or whatever. So I thought we'd need to go ahead and sort of get this sort of preliminarily approved, and we would come back with a final version to the commission.
So in other words, after our county attorney look over it.
He's already, of course, have looked over this, but he's pointed out 2 things that we want to see if they're going to iterate on, and I think they will. But once we get that done, we'll be ready to go. The basic terms won't be changed. It's just a couple of things that we think we would be good if we go ahead and do that now.
And then it will come back to this committee, correct?
Well, I wasn't gonna bring it back to committee, I was gonna go straight to budget and then to the full commission, but I can point out any changes that might have been done.
Okay. So in other words, you will send each member of this committee probably a revised copy
Yeah, we
showing
would
the
do that.
changes?
Yes, sir, and we would
Okay.
outline those changes before we take it to budget.
This has got to be a typo on page 5, but at the top of the page it says, installing and continuously operating an emergency services facility containing not less than 2 ambulances serving the community and emergency management administrative offices. I guess that's supposed to be emergency medical service offices. Okay, we're not moving any of that.
Oh, no,
I just
no,
wanted to,
Well,
I saw that.
don't, well, we couldn't clarify that. No, that's not the intent of that.
That's what I figured. I just wanted to.
Okay.
That's right.
Do I hear a motion to that effect?
Make a motion to send it to the county attorney and then on the budget. Is that what you want, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, subject to some changes that we will identify and communicate with you. But they're nominal changes. They're not of substance.
I got a second from Commissioner Gooch. Any more discussion?
I can chime in that I think the Budget Committee is anticipating this. We did set aside some money for the new station, anticipating this kind of a lease.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, any more discussion? If not, call the roll.
Commissioner Baum?
Yes?
Commissioner Coggan?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
Commissioner McAdoo?
Yes. Okay. New judicial building. At our last meeting, we had a package that was prepared, I'd say, 8 to 10 years ago.
Well, we've had 2 studies, and the last one we had was completed in 2008.
Okay, 2008, and we allocated, I think it was $30,000 to do an update on the data on that package. And it's my understanding that that has been done, and so the mayor's going to present that to us tonight.
Okay, we have with us Mr. Mike Thomas, and we're going to ask him to come forward here. You can
Where
get
would you
right,
like me to be?
get any one of those chairs there, maybe in the middle would be better.
All right. Is this far enough over?
Yeah. Now, Mr. Curtis and his firm, they did their second study, which was completed in 2008, and they have very, very timely already updated this study that we got approved a couple of months ago. I think it wasn't even that long, hardly. But in any event, he's going to make this presentation. Now, this presentation, all of these pages, is on your iPad. But Mr. Thomas felt maybe, since he's going to be referring to a lot of this in some detail, and some of this is pretty fine print, that you've got in front of you a hard copy. If you want to, when he refers to a page, you can find it in your hard copy, or if you're quick enough, and you can find it on your iPads. But in any event, you've got both options available to you there. And we're going to take as much time as we need to take and as you want him to take. And he's going to take this from the beginning, so we're not going to start on the last page if we want to. He's going to lay the foundation of exactly where we are and what we're doing and where we need to be. And you can interrupt him and ask questions as you so choose, and he can tell you a little bit more about himself as if he wants to when he starts. So I'm going to let him do most of all of this presentation, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think anybody would object to him doing that.
One more, please, if somebody wants one back.
Okay, well, I'll get started. I'm Mike Thomas. I'm the president of Justice Planning Associates. I recognize some of you from 5 or 6 years ago. We were hired in 2007, finished our report in 2008. And at the time, we had 3 primary tasks that we were looking at. We were looking at the long-term operational requirements of your court system. That was task 1. Task 2 was to evaluate your existing facilities, and we scored them both on a spatial and operational basis. Just for the record, they scored 3.2 on a 10-point scale. Our third task was to take those 2 requirements, the future requirements for your court system and your existing capabilities, and make a plan. And we looked at a lot of different options. We looked at splitting the courts, we looked at reusing existing facilities, we looked at big buildings, smaller buildings. The 1216 option that you're familiar with was the preferred recommendation from just about everybody. It was to build a courthouse that could serve 16 courts long-term, but to only build 12 of them initially and shell the other 4 in order to save money. With that, I'll take you back a couple of months to a call I got from the mayor asking what the next step should be. And my reaction was, that planning is 5 years old. If it were 2 years old, I'd say just go with it. It's 5 years old, we need to redo it. Once we got into it and saw the population increases that you'd had over and above what was anticipated back in 2008, we felt even more committed to doing that. So we've basically reforecasted everything. And we felt we had to do that. If I can take you, the table of contents will give you opportunities to find things later if you want to. I'm going to use the paper because I like to flip back and forth, and it's easier for me to do that. It's also bigger and I can see it better. If I take you to Section A, page 1, you can see what your resident population has done since 1970. You were expected to have only about 236,000 people, as I recall, in 2010, and in fact the census discovered that you had 262,000 people. They were off by about 12%, and that's a lot. That changed all the projections. So what you're seeing now are the new projections from the State of Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development and the Tennessee State Data Center. There are some more aggressive projections out there than these that are based on the corridor, but these are aggressive enough, and these are the ones we used. According to this, by the year 2050, you would have 672,000 people in Rutherford County. That's an astronomical increase from where you've been. You're adding, in the decades ahead, about 10,000 new people a year, and that is a lot. If you look at the next page, page 2, you'll see the divergence between that black line, which was the previous projection, which only went out to 2035, and therefore that was our forecast period. That was all the population forecast we had. And the red line, which constitutes the current projection, and you can see how that red line is going up exponentially compared to the black line. It's not a straight line. If you turn to the next page, page 3, you'll see where you will be in relation to other large counties that are currently bigger than you. In about 2018, you will pass Hamilton County in population. In about 2027 or 2028, you'll pass Knox County in population. And according to this, in about 2046 or so, you will equal or pass where Davidson County is now. They're currently at around 630,000 or so, 626 in the 2010 census. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing this is because life will change with this. You know that already. You know it with roads, obviously with schools, with your court system, with everything. And one of the things that I'd like us to do as we talk a little bit today is think from an urban standpoint what some of those changes may mean 20, 30 years from now. So I'll leave that for the time being and leave population for the time being unless there are any questions, and show you some comparisons.
Why the increase? Why such an increase?
The explanations that we've gotten include that you are becoming more and more of a bedroom community to Nashville, which is not uncommon. We've seen other large cities spawn smaller communities with lower tax rates. We noticed when we were here a few weeks ago, gasoline is 25 to 30 cents a gallon more expensive in Nashville than it is here. As I drove here this afternoon around 4 o'clock, the I-24 corridor was just packed with cars leaving Nashville coming here. And there's very little traffic in the other direction. Same thing with the old Fort Road. All the traffic was inbound, not outbound. So I think the explanation is this is a popular place right now for in-migration. People are moving here, you're creating more jobs, you're getting a younger population. This is one of the youngest counties in the state, which again implies that you're getting a lot of young people moving here. But that also then implies they're going to have more children than older people moving here would, and that's going to increase your population. So those are the best explanations that we were able to get for this.
Well, I looked at the projections from Cobb County, Georgia, which is the county north of
Yes.
Atlanta. And in 1982, they're where we're at now. And these projections are pretty much identical to Cobb County, which is 600,000 people. So if you look at the comparisons between Nashville and Rutherford County and Cobb County, Marietta, Georgia,
Mhm.
to Atlanta, it's very similar.
And
So, I mean, the projections are dead on, I think.
I've seen it in some other places, Columbus, Ohio. I've seen it with a small county called Delaware, which is about the same distance, a little closer than you are. We've seen it in other places around the country, and it's scary, but I think you should treat it as real. And even if you don't quite get to that 671 or whatever it is by the year 2050, I have no doubt you're going to go over 500,000 population fairly quickly within the next 25 or 30 years or so. So it's a scary prospect, but I think you should treat it as real. If you look at the next page, this starts section B. This will show you where your court system is in terms of judgeships versus population. And at the moment, you have the highest ratio of population per judge if we combine trial court judges and general sessions judges of the 7 major counties in the state. What that tells me is you're going to get another judge sooner rather than later. And I'll get into this in more detail as we go along, but I think you're looking at getting another trial court judge in the next 5 or 6 years probably. It's possible even before the building could open, the new building could open. The next page will show you trial court filings per judge. And again, we've taken the combination of Chancery Court, Circuit Court, some counties have a separate criminal court, and we've combined them for the purposes of this comparison. You are the highest by a large margin in caseload per judge. And again, there's no formula that the state uses now. You have to go lobby for judges and you're competing against other people, but the next time you lobby for a trial court judge, the competition on paper is going to be heavily weighted in your favor. So again, I think you're going to be looking at a new trial court judge within a fairly short period of time.
So what you're saying is that we supersede Davidson County for cases?
Yes, sir. Well, in per
Per
judge caseload, yes, sir, you do. You're the highest in the state among the 7 largest counties. And we didn't look at all the counties in the state because this takes time to accumulate that data, but you are. And Montgomery County is number 2. Actually, Davidson and Shelby County, the 2 largest, most populous judges, have been quite effective in getting judges over the years. And they compete with each other. If one gets a judge, the other one gets a judge. So there's a lot of politics, and you know it better than I, in getting new judgeships, but the clock's ticking on that. If we look at the next page, it's not quite as bad news on the general sessions side. You will catch up to a point where you will need another sessions judge probably by 2020 at a guess. But I think your next judge will be a trial court judge. And again, I'm giving you a very abbreviated version of this, but all that analysis plays into my guesses as to which will come first, the trial judge or the sessions judge. Section C is starting to talk about some of the factors which drive caseload. Crimes as measured by offenses, arrests, clearance rates, sworn officers, all those things play into criminal filings. one of the things that's interesting, if you look at the next page, page 2, C2, you'll see that your offenses have sort of leveled off. Your Group A offenses have leveled off a little bit in the last few years. That's actually a nationwide phenomenon. For some reason, and nobody can really explain it, and a lot of people have tried, crime has gone down a little bit nationwide. For the first time since World War II, from 1945 until about the year 2000, there was a steady increase nationwide, not every year, but over time, and it leveled off, it plateaued. I don't expect that to continue. I cannot imagine that it will continue, and particularly with your population increasing. So it's just something to observe. We've forecasted offenses based on your history. I wouldn't be surprised if your offense rate ends up being quite a good deal higher than that. But there's no data to tell me that it would be, except my belief that crime is going to go back up again over time. And population does drive it. It is a factor. Each time you see one of these forecasting tables, you're going to see a lot of different models on the table. We've tried looking at a lot of different ways of analyzing the data and projecting into the future. Where you see a little arrow next to that model, we've used that model and averaged. We never want to pick one model and say, this is the answer, this is it, this is the exact number. Where we say, for instance, that there are 38,104 Part A offenses in 2045, the only thing I know with absolute certainty is that there will not be 38,104. I mean, it's an educated guess. But the difference between using a lot of models and using one model is like the difference between an aimed rifle shot, where a little bit of wind or a leaf or something like that can deflect the bullet, or a shotgun blast, which sends pellets out in a pattern, which can hit a target in a broad way. And that's what we're trying to do with our forecasting. We're trying to hit all around it. But rarely would we use forecasts that tell us radically different things. We're trying to find forecast models that give us similar results. So that's all I'm going to say about the forecasting process, which is very involved and takes us a lot of time. But it's all here for you to look at. With the exception of the regression models, you could sit down with a calculator and a piece of paper and replicate the majority of these models. And a computer will do regression for you. So they're easy for you to understand and easy for you to reproduce yourself if you really want to. With that, I'm going to go to section D, which is the trial court analysis. You'll see from that our forecast period here for offenses can only go from 2001 on. We can't go back earlier than that. So we're just showing you all the data that we could accumulate in one format, and that may be the first time you've seen that long a period with all those variables included in them. The next page graphs it for you, and you can see what's gone up and what's gone down. I'm going to jump into some projections now, starting on page 3. And again, if I go too fast, I have no idea, whether I'm going too slowly, too fast. So stop me if I'm going too fast, or go like that if you want me to speed up. The Chancery Court has increased from about 1,650 filings in 1993 to about 2,969 in 2012. That's nice, steady, symmetrical growth, fairly easy to forecast. Just in case you're wondering, the reason that we can't use some of our models, you'll see a bunch of models. Models 4 through 9 are population-based. Your population's actually growing faster than your caseload. And that's an interesting thing, because I've worked in a lot of places where caseload grows faster than population. It worries me sometimes, because I have a feeling that at some point the caseload starts to catch up to the population growth a little bit. But again, you have to go with the data that's there. And right now, your population's growing faster than your caseload. So there are certain types of models we can't even use. But this forecast for about 6,700 filings in 2045 is a very credible forecast. And an easy way to see all this stuff is to turn to the graph on the next page. The black squares represent history. The red triangles represent the forecast. And you can see that that's a pretty good linear progression there. So again, this is a very credible forecast. Circuit Civil is very similar to Chancery. It's growing fairly fast, but not as fast as population. And I'll skip straight to the graph on page 6, and again, you can see that is a very credible graph. Criminal's a little trickier. You've had some recent increases in filings and some recent increases in arrests, but again, that was based on a pretty flat offense rate. I still feel that offenses are probably going to increase in the future. I think the crime rate's going to come back. It's bad news, but I do think so. But this is all we can do from a forecasting standpoint. So the graph on page 8 is not nearly as credible as the previous graphs. It could be higher than this, but there's just no way to forecast it. The next page after that, page 9, shows you our trial court judgeship projections. Now, judgeship projections are tricky. You can use population, but you won't necessarily get a judge just because you get more people. You can use caseload, but you won't necessarily get a judge just because you have more caseload. So we look at your history on how many judges you've been able to acquire historically. We look at population, we look at caseload, we try to look at all the variables we can, and we even look at comparably sized counties to try to see what they're doing in terms of judgeships. Our bottom line on this, as it was back in 2008, one of the things you'll see, and I should have pointed this out earlier, you see the gray shaded area which shows you the recommended forecast? At the bottom of that in fine print, which is a good reason for looking at this paper version, you'll see the projections from the 2008 report. And in most cases, our projections are tracking pretty well. But we've carried them out further. In 2008, we only went out to 2035. This time, we've gone out to 2045. And it's partly because it's 5 years later, but it's also partly because we have population projections now all the way out to 2050 so we can do it. I would not want to just gamble without the population projection. But you can see that we're projecting about 9.9 judges, so 10 judges, trial court judges, by the year 2045. And I think that is a very credible forecast. Could it happen earlier? Could you have them by 2040? You bet. Could you not get that 10th judge until 2050? You bet. But you're in the neighborhood. It's about 10 judges in about 2045. Trial court master and child support magistrate are tricky. Your clerk and master has to split his time between his clerical responsibilities as sort of court administrator for the Chancery Court and between his responsibilities in actually handling a caseload. We think that'll remain about a half-time caseload. The clerk and the child support magistrate was just created in 2007, so there's really no history to look at there. But we think either you'll continue to have one child support magistrate, or if that caseload increases, it gets pushed off into a trial or sessions judge, or if that doesn't happen, you get another magistrate, and maybe that delays getting a judge. So we have to provide court space for that person, but we're just going to hold this flat at 1.5 all the way out. So you currently have 9.5 judicial officers. It's important to know that. Although you have the 3 sessions judges, the 5 trial court judges, you also have 1.5 additional judges. And right now you're trying to work that out with 8 courtrooms and some extra use spaces that are just used in a catch-as-catch-cans fashion. General Sessions is next, and I'm going to go through this one fairly quickly as well. One thing I will tell you is that traffic filings are extremely volatile, so we treat them separately. You had a situation where you lost 2 state troopers transferred or whatever, and all of a sudden your traffic filings went down by a large number. That can happen. One new trooper, one less trooper. So what we typically do is forecast the criminal and civil separately from the traffic. And that's what you're seeing on page 3. This is section E, page 3. And this is a credible forecast. It's a little bit of a scary forecast where early in the period you had about 15,000 filings and now you've got 30. We believe that by 2045 you're looking at about 68,000 filings in sessions, and that's non-traffic. If you look at the graph on the next page, again, it's a very credible forecast. Traffic is not a particularly credible forecast. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail, but you can see that you had, if you look at the top of table E5, page 5, you had almost 14,000 filings in 2005. Then all of a sudden you've got 7,900 filings in 2006. That's 2 troopers. That's all it took. And your filings went down by almost half. So you can't really forecast that very well, but the good news is they don't have a lot of impact on your court system in terms of judicial time. They have impacts in other ways, but not in terms of judge time. The sessions judge forecast is for approximately 6 judges, double the current number by 2045. And again, that tracks very well through 2035 with our previous forecast. We were forecasting 4.9 back then. We're forecasting 5.0 now. And that's even with the population increase, because again, you won't necessarily get new judges just because you have a lot of people here. And your judges will, as they are now, learn to cope over time with increasing caseloads. That does happen. And judges are remarkably flexible, and you've had good judges. You've been lucky in that respect. The only other projections that I'm going to show you are the circuit clerk and the clerk and master. And the circuit clerk is a little complicated, so I'm going to take just a minute on this one. Between 1993, I'm on page, section F, page 2. Sorry. When we were here in 2008, you had 30 people in the clerk's office, 32 then in 2009. That growth from 24 to 32, 8 people over that period of time, was nice, consistent, symmetrical growth. A new clerk came in and made some changes. They're good changes, but they're different. They're kind of one-time changes. One thing that the clerk did was create a records management division to scan all the old cases and get rid of paper. So scanning all the old ones and going forward with as much of a paperless system as she possibly can. That's sort of a one-time deal in terms of those 3.5 people. The 4-person collections division is similarly kind of a one-time deal. You're going to be increasingly online with your collections over time. So what we've done is say that increase that's occurred since 2010 is sort of a one-shot increase. So we took the growth from the period from 1993 through 2009 and then ran that off the base of 39.5 people, which you currently have. We think that's the most valid way to forecast this. Based on that, you'd have about 58 people in your clerk's office in 2045. If you turn the page, you'll see why we did that. See how you're getting a very consistent trend line here up to about this point, and then all of a sudden it goes straight up. You don't want to be forecasting straight up like that. You want to be forecasting out here, and that's what we're doing. So that's the reason that graph looks a little funny. Clerk and master has had some natural growth, but they've handled it recently through part-time positions. And those part-time positions equal about 2 1/4. We rounded it to 2.5 positions. Based on the 13.2, currently, we're projecting about 21 in clerk and master staff by the year 2045. Now, that's important because we're planning our new building for 2045 this time. And we don't want to fool around with 2035 plus growth. We're just going to go 2045, that's it. And about that point is when your building's going to get full. It's going to get full somewhere around 2045, maybe 2050. And I'll talk about that in a little bit and what happens then, because I think you've got to plan this very long term in your minds as you do this. The kind of population growth you're looking at isn't going to stop in 2045, 2050, and neither is your court system. So the next couple of graphs will show you summaries, and the clerk and master particularly. You see this blue graph on page 6. See how symmetrical that line is, and see how asymmetrical the red one is because of that short-term increase in staff in order to accomplish a couple of specific objectives. So we flattened that red line out a little bit. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Section G starts to summarize space needs. And we start again with a graph, which shows you growth. And again, we can't get anything more symmetrical looking than that. Your growth has been very predictable, we think, and will continue to be. You'll go from about 87 people today, candidates for the new courthouse, that is, to about 148, we think, over the next 30-some years. I need to define some square footage terms for you, and some of you will already know these terms. Some of you may even remember it from our work back in 2008. Net square feet is a term we use a lot. The room that we're in is net square feet. If I were to count ceiling tiles and tell you how big this room is, and I don't know, it's about 400, 450, something like that, it's a net space. But the walls around this room on 3 sides and the corridors which connect this room to other rooms which form a suite of rooms, we call department space. And to get that department, we use a departmental gross square footage. So we take our nets and then we multiply that times a multiplier to say, okay, that gives us a suite. And this will give the architects then some instructions on what they're going to be ultimately designing and building. In order to build a building around all those suites, court rooms, clerk's offices, jury assembly rooms, all the rest of it, we use a building gross factor. The building gross factor gives us everything from elevators to columns, the exterior skin of the building, the fire stairs, the secondary lobbies of elevators, all that sort of thing. And we put a mechanical factor in there as well. So you'll see all those on our scenario, and if you don't know what the definition means, you can just flip back to this page, and this will explain it to you. The space standards that you see on table G3 are similar to, but not identical to, what we used in 2008. We've increased a couple of our space standards in the last 5 years. One of them was our standard courtroom. In 2008, our standard courtroom was 1,800 square feet. We'd noticed on courthouses that we've done over the last couple of years, and the mayor thought I should tell you this, we've been involved in the design of about 90 courthouses in the last 30 years. I personally have been involved in that. So we're constantly updating our standards. We were having more trouble, frankly, meeting ADA and technology. And one of the places we were having trouble was in jury boxes. People are now almost exclusively going to monitors in jury boxes, and we've had to deepen the jury box in order to accomplish that. So we've increased our standard courtroom size from 1,800 to 2,000 square feet. Now that's going to make your building a little bigger than it was back in 2008, but we think it's very important for you. So that's one of the things we've done. The large courtroom back in 2008 was 2,400 square feet. We increased that one by 100. The jury has less impact in the bigger courtroom. The next page will show you some approximate dimensions, and it'll also show you what we have in mind in terms of sorting. Back in 2008, we proposed 2 large courtrooms, one for the Sessions Court and one for the trial court. We'd also proposed a small non-jury courtroom, and that was to be primarily for the chancellor. We've gotten rid of that small non-jury courtroom. We need to make this building more flexible. And I think, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think in 2045, 2050, you're going to have to do something else. And when you do that, we need to have all 16 of those courtrooms as flexible as they possibly can be. So that's made the building just a little bit bigger, but it's a more flexible building than it would have been back then. So that's the only real change we have on this page. The planning standards are basically about the same. You can review these at your leisure. One thing that the mayor particularly wanted me to emphasize was the separation of judges and the public. The best way to do that is to show you a diagram on page 6. This color-coded diagram shows you the way a modern courthouse is organized. And unfortunately, when your courthouse was built in 82, I believe it was 82, it was not done this way, and it should have been. This zoning plan has been available nationwide since the mid-70s forward, really. What you'd like to do is have a pair of courtrooms. Between a pair of courtrooms, you put a prisoner elevator and a couple of holding cells. They're short duration holding cells. That way you've got the inmate now, the defendant in custody, completely separated from everybody else. That red zone never touches any other zone in the building. Comes straight up from a sally port and a central holding area under the building. And you can go up between however many courtrooms you need to then without ever seeing the public or without ever seeing judges, juries, or anybody else. It's a very secure arrangement. Then the light blue that you see here is public circulation. Your corridors in your existing courthouse, and one reason you're having so much trouble over there, are only 8 feet wide. Just to give you a comparison, in a modern courthouse, our minimum standard is 14 feet. We sometimes do a 16-foot wide public corridor. We want to spread people out. We don't want conflict. We don't want people getting agitated with each other, as they do when they're packed into too small a space and they're stressed out already. So we also create an entry vestibule to keep noise out of the courtroom, and we do a couple of conference rooms. So we can have victim-witness waiting going on there. We can have attorney-client conferencing going on. The dark blue zone that you see on the back side of that courtroom, that is restricted circulation. You get back there by permission only. That is for the judges' chambers, that is for jury deliberation rooms, and they can come straight in and out of the courtroom without, again, ever encountering the public. You do not want judges riding up on public elevators with people they are about to sentence or fined against in a civil action or family court matter or you name it. So we restrict that entirely, and they have a private elevator which moves them from a secure parking area under the building, which is not available to the general public or even to most staff, straight up to their chambers. This is the model, this is the gold standard for how you should develop courthouses, and all of our planning is based on this.
I noticed that on this floor here, you got 2 courtrooms, you got 1 jury deliberation. Is that one room or is that a suite of?
It could be more than one room. Right now, this is just sort of a diagram that shows adjacency, and we wanted to have a little box that we could say staff toilets and storage.
Mm-hmm.
It would depend on the court floor. If we were doing 2 courts per floor, we'd probably need to have 2 deliberation rooms. But Sessions doesn't have any. So they're just deliberation rooms for the trial courts. If we were doing 4 courts per floor, it could be that we'd do 3 trial courts and 1 Sessions court, and then you'd only need maybe 3 jury deliberation rooms. So we've developed what we think is a comfortable ratio in our planning. But it's a good question. You certainly would need to have, if not a 1-to-1 correspondence, then at least about a 3-to-4 correspondence. The next page gives you some planning standards for our judicial chambers. These haven't changed much. We've made a couple of minor modifications, but they're about the same. And then we go into component space projections. Now we can start to add it all up, and it becomes a calculus. And it's kind of like a circuit board where you can take a component out or plug it in. And that's the way we do all our planning on courthouses now. So back when, in 2008, we were looking at 8 or 10 scenarios, we could say, well, what if we added this? What if we took it out? It's easy for us to do. I'm not going to try to go through all that. It's fairly complicated. I will point out on page 10, our court and facility support spaces. These are a constant. So regardless of what our scenario might have been back then, we wouldn't change this. One thing we did change on this was to increase your central holding slightly from back in 2008. Again, I see this building long-term as purifying to more and more of a criminal court building. And I'll explain what I mean by that when we get just a little further down the road. Let me get you to the next page, which will give you square footages. The total size of this new building is right at 200,000 square feet. Now that's up from what it was back in 2008. In 2008, it was 190,000 square feet. About 8,000 of that is in the courtrooms. We added the 200 square feet. By the time you put all the grossing factors on that, we went from a civil non-jury type courtroom to a standard-sized courtroom with the normal jury accompaniment, and that added some square footage. So that's about 8,000 of that 10,000 that you see. Central holding added about another 1,000. We also increased our mechanical factor. You'll see under total mechanical electrical factor, what we do is take all these components, add them together, and then we start putting other factors on top of them. That's that page I was telling you about. We used to use 8% for mechanical, then we went to 10%, now we've gone to 11. People are bringing in more and more fresh air into buildings these days. And even if you're not trying to be LEED certified, still you're bringing in more fresh air. And the mechanical rooms have gotten bigger. So we've added a little more of that, and that's about 1,000 or so square feet. The total building size is 200,000, and then you'll see secure parking area. We don't count that as part of the building. That's sort of a garage under the building. And that's in about an additional 12,500 square feet. But again, we don't count that in the same way that we do the 200. The cost of the building, page 12. Back in 2008, we were using $220 a square foot. If you took 3% escalation from 2008 to 2014, and this is a 2014 cost number, it would be $260 a square foot. We think that's the least we should use, is $260 a square foot. Then we start putting other stuff on top of it. We've got the shell floor, we don't want to count the same, because we think that you should build 12 courtrooms. You would need 10 today, but by the time you get in this building, you're probably going to need 12. So you've got to start with 12, but you don't have to start with 16. You can save that money. You can save the money in finishing a floor. You can save the money in the furniture. You can save the money in the accoutrements, all the stuff that goes into a courtroom, the technology. So we've counted that as a shelled floor at $182 a square foot, about 70% of the construction cost. Then we've got a separate cost for our little secure parking under the building. Then we've given you 3% for site development and utilities. You've got to go in and tear down the old buildings, don't know what you're going to find there, don't know what you're going to find under them. and you've got to prepare the site. Then you may have to develop some new utilities in place of what was there. That gives you a subtotal of $52 million, 51.7, which is about $258 a square foot. Then we've given you 7% for your design and construction contingency. And again, why a contingency? Because you don't know what the heck you're going to run into. You don't know whether the building may be a little bit bigger. For one thing, if you use 2 courts per floor instead of 4 courts per floor, and there are advantages and disadvantages, one of the disadvantages is the 2 courts per floor is a little less efficient. Probably going to add another 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. That's $1 million right there. Might be $1.5 million. The contingencies for the unforeseen. And I'll get into the 2 courts per floor, 4 courts per floor, and all that in a bit. I'm going kind of sequentially here, so I hope that's working for you so far. That gives you a total construction cost at this point of $55 million, about $276 per square foot. Then you've got to have your design fees, your permits, your testing. We've allowed 7% for all that. We've given you a $3 a square foot additional security allowance on top of the $260 a square foot. That's for security hardware mostly, technology. Then a separate technology allowance. This is for some of your courtroom technology. You can go way high on that stuff. You can spend a lot of money on courtroom technology. This is moderate. This is a middle of the road kind of approach. Maybe you use more, maybe you don't. Then you've got your furniture, fixtures, and equipment. That's all the movable stuff in the building. You're going to have to buy all new courtroom furniture. All the benches, the tables, the chairs. You're going to need new judges' furniture. You're not going to want to take your old furniture for that into the new building. And you're going to have more of it that you're going to have to buy. So we've given you a pretty good allowance on that. That should be a fair number. We did take out the shelled space on this, so we're not double counting that floor. That gives you a total project cost of about $62 million and about $308 a square foot, counting design fees. You've got to escalate that because you're not going to build that today, and that's $2014. So what we've done is add 2 years of escalation. Now that's very conservative. You'll have to hustle to get anywhere close to a midpoint of construction by the end of 2016. But you can. You can get close to a midpoint of construction. So we think the 2 years of escalation at 3% is fair. And 3% is an industry standard. So that gives you a pretty fair picture of what we think your courthouse is going to cost. We think it's going to be in the neighborhood of $65 million. It's more than it was back in 2008, but it isn't 2008 anymore. And it's a bigger building now. It's 10,000 square feet bigger, but I think we had to do that in order to accommodate some long-term flexibility. And this is why you did want to take this extra little time and spend this extra little money to do this kind of analysis. You can't just off something that's 5 years old. And we actually started on that back in 2007, so in fairness, it's more like 6 years old. Here are some recent construction projects to give you an idea of what your $300 a square foot is going to buy you. The St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital was completed in 2009 at a cost of $333 a square foot, not counting architect's design fees. The Science Building was completed estimated 2014, not quite finished, at a cost of $338 a foot, not counting design fees. So you're going to have to bring in your building less than these buildings. That $300 and 3.4 or whatever it is a square foot, the comparable number would be $304.62 a square foot if I took out design fees. It's a tight budget. I don't want to say it's too tight. It's very conservative, but you'll have to work hard. It's not an easy budget to accomplish. But I don't want to blow any smoke at you here. I mean, courthouses are expensive, and it'll be hard to hold that thing to 300. It can be done, but it'll be hard. And you're not going to be able to do all the in and out geometry that you see in that hospital in order to do it. It's going to have to be a very simple building.
They
Now,
don't have this, Mike,
Ah.
but sort of give them a view of what that says on that piece of paper.
What we've done is take 37 projects from around the country. Some of them we've worked on, some of them we know the architects very well, some of them we were able to pull off the internet. The average cost per square foot nationwide for these 37, and some of them are in Canada, so more than nationwide, was $344 a square foot. Escalated, it would be higher than that. So some of these projects go back 5 years. We didn't use projects that went back, I think the oldest one we have on here is 2007. And we're going to update it next year, and we'll knock out probably the 2007, 2008 projects. The cheapest project on the list, and I did it, was Cuyahoga County. It's a $186 million project. And we brought that in at an escalated cost in 2014 dollars of $295 a square foot. It was hard work to get that thing under $300. That's the cheapest one really on the page. There were a couple of older ones, but they're not really comparable. They're too old. I'm sure the mayor can make additional copies of that available. It's just an additional check and balance. We're real careful with this stuff.
There are only 6 or 7 on this page on the escalated 2014 costs that are under $300 a foot out of the 37.
If we need to cut costs, we could always get the judge's furniture at yard sales.
Yes.
No furniture.
Lawn furniture. I mean, yeah, there are lots of ways you can cut costs. Unfortunately, parking has gotten a little more expensive too. We'd estimated 360 parking spaces would be required in a nearby associated garage. The city has its own code requirements. We've done a really careful analysis based on what we know of this new building. And based on that, you'd need 366 spaces. So any way you figure it, we're real close. We've done some research on this as well. And I'll take you first to the research pages. You've done 2 recent parking garages, both completed in 2013. That's page 16, in Murfreesboro. And they both came in at about the same cost. One came in at $54 a square foot, exclusive of design fees. The other came in at $55 a square foot. They're nice looking garages, and that's the kind of quality you're going to want as well. So we used that. We used the roughly $18,000 a space. We used roughly $55 or $54 a square foot, and we came up to a cost of $7 million. Now, we did not put an escalation on the garage. You can design your garage faster. You can build it faster. Courthouses take time. So we think that it's not really worth your while to use an escalation factor here, and I don't know exactly what it would be. You don't want to waste a lot of time on it, but I think you can do this okay for $7 million, and that should be a fine budget. Where the courthouse is a very tight budget, this one should be okay. The combined cost, if you're doing the math in your head, is $72 million. It's a big number, but that's a real number. That's, yes, sir.
Did you, when you factored in how many parking spaces you need, I know that we had looked at it going in the county clerk's area. I don't know if it's still going there or not, but the parking garage is going to take over somebody else's parking space.
It would. It would. It would displace, I've forgotten the exact number, but I think it's about 90 parking spaces. Maybe it's closer to 100. So yeah, there'd be some displacement if you put it there, but can we leave that for a minute? Because I'm going to come back to that issue of where to put this thing anyway. I've got reservations about putting it there. It would still fit there, but yes, you'd have to build a bigger garage, or you'd have to find parking elsewhere if you displaced the parking that's there.
And I noticed you got 45 to 53 months.
Yes, ma'am. And that's the
years.
next page I wanted to take you to. A new courthouse is basically 4 years away. There's a lot of stuff to do to get you there. The mayor had asked me to develop a schedule, and this is just a guess. It's just a guess. But it's based on you starting January 1st to try to get architects. Well, you've got to generate your RFP, you've got to publish it, you've got to give them about a month to respond to it. You'll get a lot of responses. You've got to create a short list. You're probably going to want to interview whoever you shortlist. You'll have to give them a couple of weeks for that. Then once you select somebody, you've got to negotiate a contract. Once you negotiate a contract, you've got to run it by the county attorney. They've got to run it by their attorneys. It's a 3 to 4 month process if you're fast. And the fact that the mayor is the procurement officer makes it fast, but it's still a 3 to 4 month process. I've seen it be much longer. The feds can't negotiate one in less than 8 months or a year, but you'll do better than that. Then the design process is probably anywhere from 18 to 21 months. And again, I wish I could pin it down for you, but I can't. There's a lot of interaction that goes on. It depends on how organized you are. It depends on how good they are at delivering. Everybody thinks that they can do it really fast until they're into it and it gets complicated and somebody says something which changes something and there's something missing on the technology, and it's 18 to 21 months. Construction. Again, you have to go through that bid selection process. Once you've got good documents, now you've got to take those documents and find yourself a contractor. You can pre-qualify your contractors, and maybe you should, so that you're not going to get 10 submittals, you're going to get 3 or 4 good ones. But even so, it's going to take you 3 to 4 months to get them under contract. And then the construction period could run all the way out to 24 months. So if you were to say in your mind 48 months from January 1st, you would not be far wrong. If you can do it in less time, great, terrific. But just be conservative in your thinking so you won't have bad surprises. The next thing, let's talk about the site a little bit. When we did this study back in 2008, we took it for granted that you would use the site shown across the street from your new building location. It's one you've been planning to use since 2001 or something. You bought the property long since. You'd sort of allocated it for that. We accepted it. I've got real reservations about using that property, and it's got nothing to do with the displacement of parking, although displacement is an issue. It'll fit there. It'll be a big looming building up near your county admin building there. It'll be a good 4 stories. It might be 5. You can only get 80 or 90 cars on that site in a garage. But my real reservation is from an urban planning standpoint. What happens when you need to expand your courthouse? What happens when you need to expand your county admin building? I know you can go up a story, I know you can flip and build something on the back side of that building, but what if you have to do a standalone building somewhere? And I'm going to suggest you will do a standalone small court annex somewhere around 2050. I think you're going to have to, because you will outgrow this brand new building that we're just about to build somewhere around 2050. What happens? The county doesn't stop growing at that point. So we've got a plan for you, but I would love for you to reserve this space, if you can, for future expansion, and maybe look in other places to see if you could find another place to put a parking garage. It's just a suggestion, but I thought I should mention it to you today and then just let you mull it over. I'm going to go on, and Paige, unless you want to talk more about that, I just wanted to touch on it.
What do you mean by that? You don't think the court building should go where we proposed it to go?
I do. I think it should go where you've proposed it to go.
Okay.
Only the parking.
Only the parking garage.
Only the parking garage should not,
Okay.
because I think you're going to. I think you should start thinking of this as a campus.
Well, if you look at all 4 blocks are government owned. One's the Murfreesboro Housing Authority,
Mhm.
one's the Health Department,
Mhm.
one's the judicial complex in the old health department, and others the county clerk building. So in 2045, the city they might move their urban housing department elsewhere. The health department might have to move elsewhere because it might be outgrown, and that could be, it's a long time away. And
it's
you've got 4 blocks there that are pretty much government owned.
Well, but you've
either by
got
Rutherford County
you've got
or-
2 blocks that are really your government campus, that are essential central business district type functions. And I would hate to see you put a parking garage in the middle of that little 2-block campus. That's where I'm going with this. And I'll show you what I mean a little bit further. I'll come back to this if I can once I've advanced the analysis just a little bit. The next page is a stacking plan. And we didn't do a stacking plan for all the options I'm going to show you. But this is just a way of us thinking of how I would take this 200,000 square feet and how I would divide it up into about a 6-story courthouse, plus a garage, a basement. If you turn to the next page, you'll see it in a diagram. And the green that you see are the future courts. And then the gray, or are the 12 initial courts, and the gray that you see is the shell floor. And right now, it's just based on 4 courts per floor, 6 stories high. But here's another urban planning issue for you. I think that this building at 6 stories and 4 courts per floor may overpower that site slightly. I'm worried about it. It is a big mass of building. I think what you might want to consider is making the building a little more graceful. Let it step back a little bit more. Maybe it's a smaller footprint. Maybe it's 3 courts per floor. Maybe it's 2 courts per floor. And now maybe it's a taller building. Tall's not bad. You've got the bank building in Murfreesboro that's a tall building. It wouldn't hurt you to have another landmark. But I just started to get a little bit worried about how much of the site we were going to have to use for 6 courts per floor and a 200,000 square foot building. That's a lot of building to put there. And the building across the street, that little court building, by comparison, is minuscule. So just something to think about. This is not something to decide. Your architects will help you with this once you hire them. But we wanted to go ahead and start thinking about it, so we showed a stacking plan for 3 courts per floor. And instead of being a building of about 100 feet, not counting a parapet and rooftop mechanical and stuff like that, now we're at a building height of about 140 feet, and it's 8 floors. Or if we go 2 courts per floor, it's a much taller building, but perhaps a more graceful one, and occupies a little bit less of the site. I still don't know that you will build a court annex on that site, even if you use the 2 courts per floor. I think it's getting crowded, and you want to leave some space for things. So I could see a future court annex possibly going across the street next to your county clerk building. Not necessarily, but possibly, because that keeps everything in very close correspondence. They're just across the street from each other. Here is the sort of long-term plan on page 6 that we think is reasonable. We think you're in your new building by 2018. So whether it's possibly late 2017, early 2018, first quarter, second quarter, I don't know. But you're in your new building in 2018. By that time, you probably have your 2 new judges. I think for sure you've got a trial court judge by about 2018. I think you've got a sessions judge maybe by about 2020, 2022, something like that. So that's going to take you out until about 2030. And you'll be able to make do with those 12 courtrooms. There'll be some courtroom sharing that'll take place again just like there is now. You'll go through cycles where you'll start off with lots of courtrooms, and then you'll fill it up, and then you'll do some sharing, and then there'll be a tipping point. The tipping point probably comes somewhere around 2030, and it's time now to finish that shell floor. So you'll finish the shell floor. You've got 4 new courts. Well, you're getting a new judge about every 5 years on the average. If we combine trial court and sessions court, that's about what it looks like to us. So you've got about another 20 years, and that takes you out to the end of our forecast period, which was 2045, and maybe it gets you another 5 years. Maybe it gets you 10. Maybe it's 2055. But what happens when you get that other judge, that other 2 judges? What are you going to do? Well, here's the plan. That building is going to be flexible enough to handle as much criminal as you want to put in it. It's going to have a big central holding area. It's got lots of jury rooms. It's got lots of holding areas on the floors. We think at that point, you'll probably take your chancery court out of the building. You'll probably take probate out of the building. You'll probably take 1 or 2 civil courts out of the building. And you'll go build a 4 to 6 courtroom annex. A small building. It won't be a big building. Now, you've built your 200,000 square foot building. You don't want to build another 200,000 square foot building. You want to build a small building. So maybe it's 60,000, maybe it's 80,000 square feet. Well, where are you going to put it? And that's what got us started thinking maybe we shouldn't put the parking garage across the street next to the court building. Maybe we ought to save that, because that might be where you want to put your annex. Again, just food for thought. But you've got to think long-term like that when you see those population numbers, because they're scary. I saw numbers out to 2060, which got you up around 800,000 people. And I don't know if that's true, but we only showed it out to 2050. They actually have projections out to 2060, and they're very high. So that's our sort of long-term planning. And we think then when you build that little annex, you've got a criminal courthouse, and then you've got this little civil annex across the street. You don't have to move prisoners there. That's what you want to avoid, is moving prisoners to 2 separate facilities. You want to keep your prisoners going one place. We think that gets you out maybe to 2080 or so. And that's how you have to be thinking, I think, in a county that's growing this fast. You can't think just 20 or 30 years in the future as we were back in 2008 now. I think you have to think 40, 50, 60 years into the future. So we've tried to take it that far out for you. And that's about the last page we've got. The very last page is just a summary of all this that puts all that information on one page. And I hope I haven't sounded like I was preaching to you when I talk about you've got to think ahead and that sort of thing. You don't have to. You can do anything you want to do. But I had to. I felt an obligation to think as far out into the future as I could for you.
Do we have any questions?
We've had more population growth than we anticipated, and that's why we've revised these plans. But I was kind of surprised that we didn't really add more courtrooms. It seems like we've added square footage, but we still have the same number of courtrooms with this plan as we had with the 2008 plan.
Well, the 2008 plan was designed to take you beyond 2035. It was always designed to do that. Now, though, I've had to look at it and say, okay, I've got them out to 2045 or 2050, okay. I already had you that back in 2008, but I can't stop there. It's
That 2008 report, we were at 2 options in, a 10/14, and maybe, we were hopeful 10/14 was going to work, maybe a 12/16, so we moved
That's
from
true.
it, maybe 10/14 to a yes, definite 12/16.
And
So we have really picked up 2 more judges.
And one of the big differences between the old plan and the new plan is you made all the courtrooms bigger.
Yes.
So they can always be able to accommodate criminal in case we have to build
Yes.
an annex later on.
Exactly.
Versus the old plan, a couple of them were smaller, which would have been.
Well, we made 2 changes, and one of them really wasn't focused so much on Rutherford County. It was just a standard that we made for any planning we do now. It was just getting tougher and tougher to make it work in 1,800 square feet. So we've made our recommended standard courtroom 2,000 now. But we did have a non-jury courtroom in there, a smaller civil type courtroom, and boy, I don't think that's a good idea anymore. I think we ought to have all standard and 2 large in the building now. So it was sort of that double whammy. And those 2 things together were 8,000 of that 10,000 square foot difference. And then the central holding area was about another 1,000. We added about another 1,000 there. And we did it for that same reason. Because there will come a time when you're gonna look at this building, and whoever is on your board then is gonna look at the building and say, gosh, we've gotta expand, how do we do that? What would be logical? Well, let's take our civil courts out, let's take our chancery court out.
Do you think going up and shortening the footprint of the building, there's gonna be space in that block for the parking garage?
No, sir.
No, sir, so we'll have to
Absolutely not.
find a different location for.
Right. This is, you have small site blocks here. That block is only a little over 300 by a little over 300. And we actually had some earlier plans, see if I've got those somewhere here, which had showed some options for the site, for the building. And you can see just from that, I actually, when I met with the mayor, I was showing him, I had a little cutout, and it may still be there, that may have been the paper clip that I had a little cutout that I could use. But here's the size of a potential parking garage. Here's the size of your new building, and that's with no setback. That's right on the street, which you'd never do. But you could not take this and put it there. And even if you made this building shrink, you couldn't take it and put it there. And you really wouldn't want to anyway. You don't want to build this beautiful new courthouse and then put a parking garage right up against it. It even has security implications that you wouldn't want to get into. So I just think we're trying to do too much on those two relatively small blocks. And they're not blocks, they're sort of half blocks. There are some other blocks in that area that are full blocks, but that's not one of them. You know, this will give you a sense of scale here. This is a Google Earth photo, and there is your site where the courthouse would go. There's your little drug court there, or drug center. There's your city, or your county clerk building, and you can see that there are some others here where you can't see. The photo cuts it off, but these are larger blocks. These are quite small, and by the time you fill this one up with a courthouse while reserving this, which you have to, I think, historically you have to, it's going to get crowded. And if you put this new building in here, it's going to be 20 feet from the edge of that building. It's really going to fill that site up. So again, I might keep that for a potential annex, and even then, it's not a generous area.
So we're gonna have to buy more land, possibly for a garage.
Well, it's something to think about.
I'm sorry, I want to go back to the size of the courtrooms, buildings again. In the plan we've just been presented, scenario 7 has 12 finished courtrooms and 4 unfinished courtrooms for 16 courtrooms.
Yes.
And if you compare that to scenario 7 from the 2008 report, it had the exact same number of courtrooms.
Yes, it did.
But this building is bigger.
Yes, it is.
And my understanding is that it's bigger because we're adding spaces to the jury boxes. Is that right?
Jury box was an easy way to explain it. We've taken an 1,800 square foot courtroom and added 200 square feet to it. That's all. But by the time you do that times 14, or in this case 15, because we made the 2 large courtrooms 100 square feet bigger, and then you multiply all the stuff times that, I mean, there's 5,600 square feet right there. Then when you convert the small non-jury courtroom to a standard courtroom and add a jury deliberation room to that, there is another roughly 2,500 square feet. I mean, I did the math just out of curiosity while I was sitting waiting for the mayor. It's about 8,000 square feet right there. The things that we've done give you more long-term flexibility. We should do them. I feel obligated to do them. So the building has grown by about 10,000 square feet without adding any more courtrooms. We could add more courtrooms. There's a point at which you can no longer afford to build. And my theory, and again, I've been doing this for 30 years, is that this generation can and should build a generation ahead. So you ought to be building 25 or 30 years into the future. You ought to be thinking 50 or 60 years into the future, but can you really afford to build that far into the future? Is it fair to your current taxpayers to build for 40 years or 50 years? So I could make the building 18 courts, I could make it 20 courts, we could have 2 shell floors and make it 20 courts, and now it could accommodate you to probably 2070 or so. Could you afford it? At some point, would you say it's too much? So we think we're hitting a reasonable medium here. It's the same 1216, and as the mayor corrected me, versus the 1014, which was being seriously considered 5 years ago, and which you wouldn't dream of considering today. But it's the same theory that we're going to take you out to 2045, 2050, something like that, but no further. And you could direct us, take us further. But $300 a square foot.
Any more questions?
On the different stacking options, is there a price difference?
Probably. I think that the 2 courts per floor is more expensive. You're duplicating some things. You're duplicating elevators and elevator lobbies. They go up more stops now. You're duplicating fire stairs. You may still need the same number of fire stairs or only 1 fewer, but you're doing it for more floors. There is some additional cost associated with it. Your contingency partly helps you with that sort of thing because you don't really know going into one of these things exactly how you're going to design it and how you're going to build it. Is it going to be 4 courts per floor? Is it 3? Is it 2? But again, from an urban standpoint, I got worried about the 4 courts per floor and started to explore the possibility that it's a taller building. And it would add some cost.
And just one other thing, on the technology, it's always kind of funny, it seems like the smallest dollar draws the most attention. It just seems to me that maybe $3 a square foot isn't enough for, you said it's middle of the road technology.
It is.
Is that, I mean, I guess that's a decision we have to make, but just out of curiosity, what would high-end technology be if we're planning?
Might
20, 30
be,
years down the
I've
road?
seen it $8 a square foot.
Oh, goodness.
The good thing about technology is you can add it as you go along.
What are you doing the most of?
The most of it would be your basic stuff. It would be your
I mean, are you
courtroom.
doing mostly $3 a square foot, or
Oh.
are you doing mostly 4?
I don't know that I could say. Again, it depends on how tight I'm trying to make the budget. Give me any amount I want, I'll probably go with $4 or $5. I probably won't go higher than that in an initial budget. But I salve my conscience here in going with 3 by saying you can add technology as you go along. Some of the stuff you can't. Some of it's front-end cost, you've got to go spend it. Your furniture, your fixtures, your equipment, stuff like that. We don't fool with that. That's $12 a department gross square foot. I'm not doing 11. The technology budget, I think that's a little more flexible because you can decide, well, we'll add some more technology 2 years down the road out of some additional revenue stream other than what you allocated for this capital expenditure.
Any more questions?
I've got one more, and this just has to
Okay.
do with our horizon. Back in 2008, the projections ran from 2008 through 2035.
That's
So that
correct.
was a 27-year period.
Right.
Now, it's been 5 years since then, but
Right.
the projections in this report run through 2045, so that's a
Right.
33-year period. So we've got a longer horizon
You
in
do.
this report. Is that just because we have a longer horizon worth of population data to use, or is there another reason why
Well-
you've chosen to go from a 27-year horizon to a 32-year horizon?
It's a combination of things. Back in 2007, when we started this, we only had population projections out to 2035. Would I have considered going to 2040? I might have if I'd had the population projections, but I felt pretty good about the 27-year horizon because I could think beyond that, and we did. The 1216 plan envisioned you growing out to 16 judges by about 2050 anyway. I mean, I could do that kind of an extrapolation by just saying, okay, you're going to add a new judge about every 5 years. So I could go beyond the projections. This time I had two factors going for me. I had, number one, the fact that I had population projections out to 2050. Why not use them? Number two, the population projections were so strong, so much growth, that I was worried to go for a smaller period now. And I had a nice 20-year data period that I could use too. I could go back to 1993 before I had a shorter data period. I only had 17 or 18 years that I could go back. I think we were using 2006 data because it was 2007 when we started the study. So I didn't have as long a data period. I think I had 17 years. This time I've got 20. Gave me a little more confidence to go a little further. So it was a combination of all that. But I wanted to give you your money's worth. I mean, that kind of population growth I've seen before, and it has never stopped scaring me when I see it. I worked in Palm Beach County when Palm Beach County was projected to double from 700,000 to 1.4 million. How do you do that? How do you add 700,000 people in 20 or 25 years? Well, they did, and the building had to account for that. So,
Any more questions of the committee members? Since we have a large audience here, and I'm gonna ask the committee, do you think it'd be feasible to suspend the rules and maybe some of the professional people in the audience would like to ask some questions? And I will leave it strictly up to the committee, and I would like to hear a motion to suspend the rules.
I make a motion that we suspend the rules so the audience can speak.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Yes. Aye.
Okay. So who wants to start first from the audience?
I'll start.
Hey,
I'm
Judge,
David
come on,
Baker.
Judge.
We talked about the parking garage, you and I talked about in the office, and there's a space on the other side of the old, that we talked about there. I don't know who owns that parking area of the city or county, somebody owns it. And maybe put the parking garage on the other side of this projected building. Is that still a possibility? Where would this garage go?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask.
Which piece you talking, the little park?
Yes, there's a small parking lot, and there's a house on each corner adjacent to that parking lot.
Yeah, and there's on the other corner, there's a apartment complex, right?
Yes, sir, on a small apartment
Yeah,
complex.
that's a suitable site. I mean, of course, you've got multiple owners there, and we'd have to find out if we could actually make arrangements to get that purchased at a reasonable price.
And if you talk about it at a public meeting,
Let
it
me say
drives
this,
the price up.
that is a logical
That might
place.
be a logical location. Okay.
There are,
Since we weren't talking about a place, I just thought if that might be something that would be thought about.
Well,
I
we
can
talked
take-
about a few options.
Okay.
we have discussed a few other locations,
Okay.
and I have discussed a few other locations with the owners, so, but I have nothing of. that's
Nothing in
definitive-
concrete.
Nothing definitive that I can tell you, but we do have some possibilities that might be achievable.
There will be alternate locations. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And it's for the same reasons you and I discussed.
Okay.
From a long-term urban perspective, that just might not anymore be where you want to put it now.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else from the audience? Got one hand in the back.
My name's Steve Hoffman, and I live in this downtown area. I'm a resident of Murfreesboro for 40-plus years, and lived downtown for 30 years. What caught my interest was the mention in the newspaper today that the old hospital, the MTSU site, was being considered as an alternate location for this. And a group of the neighbors are here just because we're concerned. I live a block away from it. My daughter lives right on the corner of it. My mother lives a half a block away from that. What impact is this gonna have in the kind of, activity we see it going on at the courthouse now? The milling, the other people coming around, sure, we were handling the court cases and the people, but there's a lot of other people come waiting to pick up the people being processed through that. that I don't think is really being addressed that, and it's gonna have an impact on the residential area that would be put in if that's considered an alternate site. And that's why I'm here, just to see what goes on, how does this process really work, how we can express our concerns with this process. I'm not, this is great, and I honestly believe that it's needed somehow, but, you know, in my backyard, I'm not sure.
I understand your concern, and I think what you are addressing is an article that was in the paper, and I think it came from one of our judges, Judge Corlew, and expressed maybe considering buying the
Yes, sir.
old hospital site that MTSU owned now to put this judicial building, and saying that site would hold the judicial building and also the parking and all that. I think several years ago, even before that hospital was torn down, and some of these other committee members, we were looking at different spots throughout the area, maybe to purchase or so we wouldn't have to go through building this judicial building, maybe so on and so forth. And that was one spot that we were looking at, was the old hospital site, and it was a lot of things that came up that turned us away from that old hospital site. And I think maybe some of the other committee members may remember some, but I don't know if I can say that we are looking at that spot tonight, because all our projections, ever since I've been in county government, it's been several years, has been to stay on the square, to keep this downtown area alive. So therefore, it looked like the county over the previous years has been doing that. So it looked like any project that we start is gonna be earmarked for the downtown area, because I don't know if that was a handshaking agreement between the city or whatever, but it looked like that's the process that we're gonna take, and I don't see no reason why we're gonna move from that, because not only that site was brought up, but it was also brought up about building out there by the jail. You know, that was a site. Yeah, we've looked at other sites, but if for some reason or another, we're trying to stay in the downtown area. Any other committee member want to add to that?
I was gonna say that our consultant here even said that it needs to be where we've said it was gonna go all along. That's in the plan, is to put it exactly where it's supposed to be, in between Church and Maple there.
The problem with moving it away from where you're planning to move it, in addition to any other considerations, any other urban issues, there are some practical operational reasons why it needs to be there. The county clerk serves probate, and needs to be near that. The DA and PD have their offices. They have to be in easy proximity to this building, and if you moved the courthouse to some remote site, you'd have to find space for them near it. So there'd be a domino effect that I think you would want to avoid. I think you're fine with the site that you've got.
Also, we have a big investment. If people don't know, we already have a big investment in that block, because we condemned and took that whole block just specifically for this project. And I'd hate to go out and try to explain to the public why I took this block, and now all of a sudden I'm gonna move somewhere else, you know. But it's several reasons that more likely that's gonna be the spot for this new judicial building in that area, and I don't foresee it going on the hospital site out there that MTSU own. Maybe the mayor can add more to it, but I just don't see it.
That site's been sold to MTSU. I don't know what the number was, but it's in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million. So we've got $1 million or plus invested in our site, and I don't think we have the ability to
I think the
really
university has
go
some
back to
plans for that
MTSU.
site.
I think so too. Well, maybe
You
that
don't
will,
think they'd swap?
yeah, maybe that satisfied the group that came up from that area.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? I like to say one thing, I like to see the crowd up here, and just don't let this be your last time, because we just beginning on this project. And I think it's gonna take a lot of input from each one of us. We can look over these figures and whatnot. We can write it up there and change it however we want and turn it in, you know, but don't lose sight and not show up again is what I'm trying to say. Just don't say, yeah, we're gonna do it, and don't have no input. I think in a discussion with the mayor, there's other things that's coming down the road, and we will have to look at committee, maybe setting up a line item for startup money, because all this consulting that we're getting done is gonna cost. But also, the mayor brought up one good point, is that we probably will need to look at a committee, a committee to look at the design of this building that's maybe made up of judges, the sheriff department, and maybe city officials, because we got city codes and everything we gotta go through with Murfreesboro. I think I'm putting words in the mayor's mouth, but I'll let him speak on that. But we got a lot of work ahead of us on this project. But we got to get started. And I asked for our maintenance director, Ben Mackey, there he is, to be here tonight, because, as you know, at the last committee meeting, we had to spend $191,000 just to try to put a roof on a building over there. And I foresee other things coming over there with the existing building that we got. The existing building that we got is, we've stretched it to the limit. And nobody can get up here and say that it's 100% safe for the public or 100% safe for the employees over there. So if we got started in 2014, you're looking at 4 years. If we keep prolonging this project, it's gonna add more money, and we're gonna be in a worse situation than we are now in the courthouse. So I don't know how much more that we can stand. We got to get started. There's no doubt about it. We can't just do this study and say, well, we'll hold this one off for 5 more years. That building just won't take it. We're going to be making a couple $100,000 here expenditures, maybe $1 million here. I think the elevator broke down one time over there. I don't know what it costs, and air conditioning and everything else, and our maintenance director can speak on the safety and everything of that building over there. He's patching on a daily basis. You know, it's not one where he can say, well, I don't have to touch this building for another 6 months or a year. It's something over there all the time that we got to address. And every time we address something over there, it's costing us money. And to me, it's wasteful money if we don't get started with this project. So, any other committee member would like to put in their 2 cents on this, or speak up? Or?
I think that this project, we need to move on it. I know there's some logistic things we need to do as far as the parking garage and that kind of thing. I think a good majority of the commission would be in support of this, especially finding out what we found out from Ms. Nolan on the finance side of the house. We got to go through the committee process, but we got to get those logistic things answered, and we need to try to act on it. At this point, I don't know how we need to act on it. The mayor
Gonna he's gonna let us know that in a few minutes.
Here's what, in an ideal situation, I would like to see happen. If you looked at your chart on page G17, first thing we have there is in the first quarter of 2014, do an RFP on the selection of an architect. Now, we really can't start that process until we've got money funded for the design phase of this project, which, if we were to select an architect in the first quarter of 2014, we'd start the design the second quarter or thereabouts. So this is sort of what we've done from time to time with our schools. We need to get approval if you really think we have the right plan, properly defined. we need to get approval to, in the spring of 2014, about April, is when we're gonna borrow some money, is for us to borrow the money for the design of this new Justice Center then. And that would put us in a place to start the work and start the design development and move forward. So I don't know when you think you'll have enough information or enough time to review this and reflect on this, but at some point, if you could make a motion to accept the report and move forward to budget a request for the money to design the Justice Center. And if we could get that done before the first quarter of 2014 or thereabouts, that would be ideal.
Okay, do I hear a motion to that effect? I know if I can add my 2 cents to it, maybe we got this report, maybe we can take the report with us, go over it, you know, and just fine tooth, and maybe have questions, and maybe we can direct the questions to the mayor, and he would hopefully get back with us. I would like to see us come back at the next meeting, you know, being prepared to move on, and maybe we could have our finance director here to see what figure we're looking at for this design phase, how much it's gonna cost for the
$4 million.
4 million. Oh, well, he got that for us tonight. So maybe next month, anticipating a line item for the design phase of $4 million, maybe we can come back next month and finalize that and send it on the budget. I wouldn't try to do it with a 71-page report tonight, you know.
If we do that, Mr. Chair, and then it gets the budget in December and then full commission in January, would that keep us on
Yeah, it keeps,
have mine?
That would be very reasonable.
yeah. I would think that would be a most feasible schedule. Do anybody have any objections to that schedule? I know it's a lot of work for each committee member to go over this by next month, have it made up in your mind that this is the path we want to take, and send it on the budget for this $4 million request. But time is an essence, so we got to move on it. So I think next month would be a good time frame for the committee to come up with this. So do I hear a motion to receive this report tonight?
Motion to receive the report as presented.
Do I hear got a second? Any more discussion? All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, anything you'd like to add?
No, sir.
If not, I'm gonna continue on, and just next thing on the agenda, just a reminder that we'll have a short month.
Give them all one.
Next meeting will be Monday, November the 25th at 5:30, if there's not any objections. Next month meeting will be Monday, November the 25th.
Any questions come up?
Do you want Lisa at the next meeting?
I think it would be nice to have Lisa here, because it may be a question that a committee member have, but we can't answer.
Has everybody got one?
Any more business to come before the committee tonight?
Could you send us maybe an electronic copy of this report?
It is
It's on
on,
there.
it's on SharePoint
Yeah.
that the commissioners have access to, so we put it out there today. But if you don't get it, if something's not out there, not working, let us know, please.
If you accept this, I think she put it in everybody's file.
Oh, okay.
That meeting.
Okay, I got another order of business in front of us, is just accepting the general capital building progress report. And I think a copy's been put in each and every one of your
Yeah.
mailbox. So do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Got a motion and second. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Okay, any other business to come before us tonight? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, second?
Second.
All those in favor, I know I get all eyes on that one.
I see.
Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas.
What?